KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227, or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.
Watergate! Watergate!
Get off my lawn.
Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. Lots of stuff to talk about. This is Jim Schutze. I write a column on the Dallas Observer website every weekday called Get Off My Lawn. I don't know why it's called that. I don't want you to get off my lawn, but that's what it's called. And then on Saturdays I come here at Dallas's only truly independent radio station and do the same stuff. We try to talk about what's really going on in Dallas as opposed to the official version. We were just having a little chat here during the break about the Battle of the Rouge Overpass, which you heard about on the preceding show, Workers' Beat. A great battle between Walter Reuther, Victor Reuther, other UAW organizers, and the goons at Ford Motor Company outside the Rouge plant in the 30s during the organizing drive for the UAW. The Reuthers and the other organizers were beaten by Harry Bennett's security forces, and badly beaten. I think Victor Reuther carried wounds or internal injuries that bothered him for the rest of his life. Anyway, we were chatting about historical markers. I was remembering that when I was a young man, I worked for the Michigan Historical Commission, writing historic markers. And we were so bored with the stuff we had to do. We wrote all markers for former homes of rich people. And so we discovered that there was nothing to mark the site of the Rouge Overpass, which is a very important moment in American labor history and just American history. So we proposed writing a marker for that site, and our bosses put the kibosh to it and told us that when we had done markers for all of the good history, we could do a marker for the bad history, which is why I don't stop and look at historic markers much. There is less truth in history in historic markers. I mean, what you get is usually anti-history. You get some BS propaganda version of what happened there. From white people bragging about killing Indians to a lot of celebration of former wealth, and there's the historic marker business is just very, very political. That's what it comes down to. Anyway, I don't know why I got off on that. I came here to talk about DISD and big events that happened this week. At the school board meeting, the guy I got to get to come visit this show was Eric Celeste. If anybody knows Eric Celeste, would you please tell him that I'm trying to reach him, and I want him to come be on the radio show. Eric is a former editor at D Magazine. Eric worked as an editor at the Dallas Observer, where I work. He's been around. He was at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He's now, you see Eric on a really great website and blog called Culture Map. And Eric has written a lot about what's going on with the school system and school reform and our superintendent. He had a great piece recently where he was talking about, Eric is way more in touch with what you'd call business leaders, pillars of the community, than I am. Eric doesn't have I have this disability I've mentioned before on the air that I don't like to whine about, but I've suffered with it since childhood. It's called bad personality syndrome. And Eric doesn't have that. Eric has a good personality, and so he gets along with muckety mucks. He wrote recently of talking to one of the muckety mucks who was talking about how appalled and concerned he was that the debate over the schools had turned, in his words, in the muckety muck's terms, it had turned racial. And Eric was, I don't know what he said to the muckety muck. What he said to his readers on Culture Map was, the debate didn't turn racial. It is racial. Our society is racial. Trying to pretend that there's any moment in our life as a country that isn't racial is weird. It's crazy. Of course, we have spent centuries dividing ourselves into races and killing people over it, and none of that's over or gone. I believe there's been huge progress. I think most people as old as I am would say that, agree with that, but we certainly haven't eliminated race from the map or from daily issues. And the thing with the schools is racial because we're divided up into races. The numbers in the schools are, in terms of student population, have turned. This is now very much a majority Mexican-American Hispanic district. Now I've quoted the numbers and I don't have them in front of me, so I got to do them from memory, which is always a mistake. I think it's 60% Hispanic. It may be more. It may be close, nipping up towards 70. 25% African American, and I know it's about 5% white. I've written about how those numbers are reflected or not reflected in the management ranks of the district. I know that the black student enrollment is around 24-25%. The principals in the district are about 50 to 55% black. When you go up to the next tier above principal, the next salary jump, which I think is from about 50 grand a year up to 80 or 89, black people, their percentage of those jobs drops. It's about 30. Hispanics have only about 17% of that. What's ironic, or maybe it ain't ironic, it's something, is when you go up to the high dollar jobs in the district, 90 grand and up, because there are only it's a 5% white enrollment in the district, but those jobs are overwhelmingly held still by white people. So whites haven't given up the top jobs, whites haven't given up the big contracting, but the student enrollment picture has changed. I'm going to pause for a second because we got Tony on line 2, and let me remind other listeners to call in and give us your 2 bits worth. We're at 972-647-1893, 972-647-1893. Tony, what's up this morning?
How you doing this morning?
Good. How about you?
All right. I will agree with the guy you suggested is about race. And the thing is, look at the optics. The Dallas Morning News published an article by Regional Chamber of Commerce guys,
right. Right.
Okay. They produced another article. The piece of paper that supports McMiles is about assistant counsel.
Right.
Okay. Now, last week you said that the president of Paul Quinn College supports Mike Miles.
Right.
None of those people were at the meeting.
Right.
So my thing is, so the position is that the object itself look racial. Now,
and it is racial. I mean, yeah, it's racial.
So if you look at that, now I bet you, out of all the people I mentioned, none of their kids go to actually school. None of them. Now, let's go on Mike Miles. And I'm not really against him. I'm just saying this. Like I said before on your show, let's look at what he's done in Colorado with the same process that he's done, and see how the scores match the process. And what gets me is that the one thing I like about you and other one or two people here in Dallas, I ain't talking about the major outlets, is doing an investigation means you go to the dirt too. Mike Miles, like I said, has no real official educational background. He went through like a broad kind of program and said, okay, we're gonna put private people in the public schools, and then they're taught this mantra. Okay, we have to change the school system. We have to do all these things.
Right.
Now, there's nothing wrong with change. There's nothing wrong being radical.
Right.
But guess what? When you want young people, like the other day I heard on one of the other stations that a 25-year-old person is going to be a principal. Only had 2 or 3 years of experience. Now, ain't nothing wrong with putting youthful people in positions of power and leadership.
Yeah.
But guess what? If you want experienced people, teach these kids, unless you want a whole group of people coming in and leaving the school system quick, and because at the end of the day, principal jobs pay money. That's bottom line.
Right.
And that's what. And to me, I think what I see from my observation of the DISD is this: I think the economy has hurt a lot of white middle class people who cannot afford to put their kids in private school anymore. So North Dallas is saying this: how do we attract these people to Dallas? It's
Yeah.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of school reform is pushed by the notion that we got to improve the schools to expand business opportunity and improve the economy in the city. There's a lot of money in this debate.
And to me, that's what I'm looking at, is that if it really was about the kids, I would be along with Mike Miles 100%. But when I understand the structure that's behind him, which is saying this, okay, we need kids who are college ready, career ready. And then when you look at these people who come in, look at the process and how have they closed that gap. That gap is never changed, no matter who you put in.
And Tony, as always, you've brought a bunch of interesting points to this. I'm going to let you go. I thank you for bringing those to bear. But I want to move on to just another aspect of this, and hope that maybe you'll call me back after you hear me out, and maybe other people will be interested. I want to thanks for calling. I want to talk about something that a little scenario that played out at the school board meeting that I was very aware of because I knew the people. We had there, and let me catch up, listeners. Big school board meeting this week to decide, basically, to make it, just to get cut to the chase on this, did the school board support or not support the superintendent in his big, very aggressive campaign of school reform, which included step one, replacing 50 out of 225 principals. And a really complicated deal, and some of the principals getting removed had a lot of support in the community. And so there was a lot of talk about whether or not the board would side with the superintendent. There was even some talk, and Eric Celeste, my peer and friend and colleague, I mentioned, excuse me, at the top of the show, was saying beforehand that he thought Miles might not even survive all this. So the end of the story was Miles survived big time. The school board voted 7-2 to back him in getting rid of these principals. And it was a major victory for him. It was a major defeat for Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price, who had more or less drawn a line in the sand and said, this guy's got to go, and the school board's going to tell him to shove it on all of these principal replacements. So it wound up being Mike Miles won, John Wiley Price zip. Miles won the support of the school board on this. During the debate, when the people in the public were getting up and talking, my ear turned in particular toward two people because I knew both of them. One is Joyce Foreman, who's an African-American activist who spoke, as always, very forcefully and brought a lot of penetrating thought and insight into it, and basically said that the way Miles has been going about this was arrogant. She called him a bully and said that that's no way to run a railroad, it's no way to run a school district, and so on and so forth. And Joyce brought to bear numbers and specific instances. Joyce Foreman doesn't, when she talks, people listen for a reason. However, later, one of the other speakers was Beatrice Martinez, who's a former regional director of LULAC, also very well known as an activist on education issues. I don't think it's over familiar for me to refer to her as B, because a lot of people call Beatrice B. She spoke very movingly too, and she talked about how arrogant principals had been in DISD and what a tough time parents had getting anybody to listen to them about it. How parents ran into this wall of arrogance and incompetence and a lack of accountability when they talked about how their kids were treated at DISD. So let me say one thing first. I happen to know that Joyce Foreman and Beatrice Martinez are good friends, have worked together on issues for years. They are very much on the other side of this issue. I don't know them well enough to ask them how that's affecting their friendship. It has to be tough to be on other sides of an issue, but these are people who really respect and know each other. They're way on the other side of this school reform thing, and what's running beneath that we never talk about very publicly, but it's a big deal in this whole debate. It's the division between Latinos and African Americans. When B talks about arrogant principals and area supervisors, she's talking about specific instances in the past. She's talking about specific schools where the feeling by Hispanic parents was that black administrators were giving their kids the back of the hand, that they didn't believe in bilingual, and that they thought that the Mexican immigrant kids were a pain, and that it was unfair that they had to teach these kids who couldn't speak English. And we've written about this at the Observer. There have been some pretty horrendous incidents of black on Hispanic bias. If you talk to Joyce Foreman, I guess we got to wait to the next break, or after the break. Jim Schutze, Get Off My Lawn. Here's the sad, very sad music that means I have to leave you for a few minutes, and we'll see you again in a minute.
KNON thanks you for your pledge to the recent pledge drive. Now's the time to make your pledge count. Send your pledge to KNON, P.O. Box 710909, Dallas, Texas 75371. If you missed our pledge drive, you can still support community radio by pledging on the web at knon.org. Your pledge only counts if you pay it. KNON, Box 710909, Dallas, Texas 75371. Be sure to put the name of the show that you're supporting on your check, money order, or envelope. Questions about KNON Pledge Drive? Call 214-828-9500, extension 234.
When they're gone for good. This is Scott from KNON's Texas Blues Radio telling you don't miss out on some great blues. KNON's Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 Blues CD. It's a CD put together by real blues fans for real blues fans like you. Texas Blues Radio Volume 5 features great local blues from Michael J. and the Paul Bird Band, JJ and the Detonators, the Chris Watson Band, the Two Tones, Rough Cut Blues Band, Jeff Stone with Charlie Love, Dave Millsap, Sirloin and the Ass Kicking Machine, Tutu Jones, Blues Boy Bo, Buddy Whittington, Andrea Dawson, Kirkland James, Sonny Colley, and Johnny Red and the Roosters. Get a copy now at Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Record Town in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records. This is a Dallas Blues collector's item. A very limited amount of vinyl copies can be found at Forever Young Records, the sponsor of this great blues project. CD downloads are available at cdbaby.com. Whether you get it as a download, on vinyl, or on CD, all the proceeds will benefit KNON. For more info on Texas Blues Radio Volume 5, visit knon.org.
Jim Schutze back with Get Off My Lawn. We're talking about DISD, our favorite topic, and school reform. And I want you to call up and weigh in at 972-647-1893, 972-647-1893. I've been saying all kinds of ridiculous things. And we have Josie on line 1 who may be going to take me to task for that. Josie, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you.
What's up?
Well, I just have a comment that I wanted to make. I'm a parent, however my kids are adults.
Uh-huh.
But I wanted to say concerning, you said that there was an issue between Beatrice Martinez and Joyce Foreman.
Right.
I read an article in the Dallas Morning News. I'm a blogger also. And it stated that Beatrice Martinez stated that the prior criteria for selecting principals, I guess under the Hosa administration, was friendship, cronyism, and other criteria. And I wanted to know, with the black migration from DISD, and basically those were the reasons, I'm assuming, that a lot of blacks left DISD because their kids were not getting the education that they needed. Their needs were not being met compared to the Hispanic and Latino. And I found that a lot of new schools were built in DISD, predominantly Hispanic areas. And bond issues that were passed were specifically for all of the schools, but however, the schools were built in the predominantly Hispanic areas. And to me, that's reverse discrimination because Hispanics up until 1967 were classified as white. So how are they a minority?
Well,
and as a parent, I would be very upset if my child, an African American, was in a school and their needs were not being met, because the focus was primarily on educating and improving test scores for Hispanics.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, though, Josie, about you mentioned the black exit from DISD.
Right.
And it always strikes me that there's this big story about black people that is never told in mainstream media. I don't know how good a job we do in our branch of the media either. Which is, if you back away from the whole deal and look at black people, and let's just look at our own region, Dallas, over the last 30 years, the biggest story, the biggest pattern is a story of huge success. You have black people, if you go back 30 years and look at where things were 30 years ago, you have black people who've moved up, but it's up and out.
Your hand, the number of people, black people, since you want to specifically state black people, why is it in America that black people who helped build this country still have to find themselves stereotyped and stigmatized? Why is it that you have to say, look at the gains that...
Do you think, Josie, do you think that over the last 30 years there's been a lot of upward mobility among black people?
Right.
Do you think there's been a lot of success?
That everyone should have.
Yeah. But where do you think those people have moved? Did they stay
over the city? It depended on economical reasons. I mean, you wouldn't just move to a city where there were no economical gains.
Where you can get a good house and where you can get good schools for your kids.
Right.
I think you're right. You said earlier that a lot of black people have decided, among other things, that their kids were not getting what they needed in DISD.
I stated that their educational needs were not being met under Hinojosa simply because of the fact during prior to his reign, there were 2 other Hispanic superintendents. The whole focus was educating Latino Hispanic kids.
Well,
and as a result, black kids were left in the mainstream. white kids were being sent to private
Yeah.
schools, and they no longer went to the ISD
Right.
unless it was to a magnet school.
Well, Josie, I'm not disagreeing with you. You raise an important point. I'm in for a little whipping here that I have to switch to. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
We got Joyce Foreman online, too. Joyce, how are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, I already asked that, didn't I?
Yes.
I'm trying to stall you a little bit.
You're trying to soften the blow. I understand.
What's up this morning?
Well, I've just been listening to a little bit of your conversation and would like to clarify a couple of things.
Okay.
The first thing is my relationship with B. Martinez
Right.
is still intact.
Oh, great. I was afraid to ask. I was afraid to ask.
There is a misnomer that friends do not disagree.
Right.
We disagree on this issue.
Yeah.
But we are friends, and we will be friends for life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my position is a lot different than hers based on my experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and she is taking a position based on her experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's no secret to any one of us who have been working long and hard on these educational issues that B. and Renee Martinez had a huge issue with Shirley Isom Newsom.
Right.
And anyone that she put in place in the Southern Dallas schools, they felt were inept.
Mm-hmm.
That's no secret.
Right.
And so the attack is basically on someone who has been there before.
Right.
And that's where we differ.
And Renee is a former employee of the district.
That is correct. But that is where we differ.
Right.
And I know I don't have a long time, but just to touch just a little bit on Josie, you can see the frustration in the African American community when it comes to talking about educating our children,
Mm-hmm.
because we have been fighting for education since slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Black people were not able to be educated, then we were segregated, then we were integrated, and now we're still fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a huge issue for us because we know that through education that the opportunities are greater for you. And just to address just a little bit, because I could talk about this forever, just a little bit about why there is mobility of African Americans outside of the urban areas.
Right.
That's around the country.
Right.
That's not a new nuance in Dallas.
Right.
Because the goal for people is to get educated and be able to live wherever you choose.
Sure.
Not to be stigmatized because you chose to move out.
Mm-hmm.
My neighborhood, there are many professional African Americans still living within the city of Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to take other things into consideration beyond just the educational system. It's the economics in the particular areas. It's the housing stock. I mean, there are other issues that has to be taken. So we can't just say it's only about education.
No, but here's what gets me about the coverage of the issue. Some years ago, the Morning News had a headline, Black Flight. And it characterized the migration of black people outward as sort of equivalent to white flight.
Well, it's not equivalent because if you look at it, several years ago, the Housing Authority began to put their housing vouchers, which were for low-income African Americans, whites and Hispanics, but a lot of them being African Americans, out into the suburban cities.
There's that, but there's also black upward mobility.
That is correct. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a balance on that. So
Right.
just using that professional African Americans have moved 10 miles out into DeSoto is not a clear picture
Yeah.
of what is actually going on in terms of where African Americans are.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any chance that you and B would come be on this show together?
I don't know. I can't speak for B. I can only speak for me. I love her as a person. I disagree with her on this issue. And I'm pretty firm on my stance, and I have no intentions of changing it.
Mm-hmm.
She might be willing to. I am willing to address the issue anywhere and everywhere that I can because I believe what's going on in public education around the country is extremely important to all of us.
Well, I'm not talking about putting boxing gloves on you or anything like that. I just think it would...
Yeah, but I know you media people.
You people. See how you talk about us?
People. I know you media people, and you will try to put boxing gloves
on us. Next year, you're going to tell me some of your best friends are media people.
Well, actually, they are.
Oh.
Actually, they are. And then just quickly, because I know you have to run, but just about this whole deal with what's happening with the employees at DISD and the low morale, and what's happened with the two principals that were non-renewed.
Right.
And what my personal position is, I think I stated it the other night, but maybe many of your listening audience did not hear it. And it is that I am absolutely not against accountability for anyone in any job. My problem is the fairness of the process that has been acted by the new superintendent.
Let me ask you a question, Joyce, before you have to go. Why was there so much debate about the principals? And then there's that vote, and it's over. Then the question of some 300 other employees comes up, and not a word is said.
We had no idea that they were voting on the teachers. Now, evidently, the teachers' union, because they did speak to it.
Yeah, they did.
The teachers' unions did speak to it. But some of us lay people had no idea. And if you noticed, on the same day, the Dallas Morning News education blog put out an article based on the number of educators that have left in the last few months, which was 700 and something. And then when you add this 400, you got almost 1,200 vacancies. That's going to be, and that does not include what's going to happen at the end of the year, because the morale is so low. People are going to get out and go somewhere where they feel valued.
Well, that's a part of it that I don't get at all, and that's a very interesting question. Are there like 5,000 people applying for those jobs? Have they got people lined up? Or is it easy to replace these people, or is it...
It's never been easy to replace educators. Why do you think they have alternative ways of getting teachers? They have alternative certification. They have people like Teach for America. I mean, it is never easy to replace educators. And part of that is that the competition has also grown in the suburban cities, because their student population has grown also. And DISD has stayed pretty stagnant.
And I'm aware from this debate that part of the problem in a lot of schools is vacant positions
absolutely.
All year.
Well, substitutes are in these positions all year now. What's happening is the administration is not sharing that information in an adequate format, so the trustees are able to really digest what is going on. But that is a sad situation. Not only are there substitutes in many of the classes, in some classes they have teachers that are not certified to teach that class.
That substitute thing, when my kid was in DISD, there are a lot of fine people who are substituting. There are a lot of people with teaching experience who are substituting. But there are people in there substituting
that should not be in front of the children.
No, shouldn't be in the building. I was on that committee, whatever they call it, for the parents, site-based something.
Site-based management.
My wife made me do it, and
good for her.
We had a meeting where one of the new parents said to the principal that he was concerned that some of the substitutes weren't qualified in their subjects, and the principal said, "Oh, sir, I can't get substitutes who are sane."
That's ridiculous.
And some of them are really, really bad. That's a scandal that is sort of
brewing under the
radar. Yeah.
Well, I think that needs to be addressed, but I think first and foremost we've got to make sure that we don't have teachers and principals who have very low morale, because that also transcends down to our children and their education. And if we want these children to be college and career ready, then we've got to make sure from the top that we're not using a disruptive behavior
to try to make things happen. We teach our children better than that. So we got to do better.
As I've always said, there's a lot of crazy stuff being talked in all of this, but if you want to hear an intelligent discussion of what's really going on, you got to listen to Joyce Foreman. I think you also have to listen to Bea Martinez. I wish I could get both of you on here next week. During the week, I'll start trying.
Well, call Bea.
Okay, I will.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Have a great day now.
Bye.
Bye.
Randy, have we still got you on line one? Have you stuck with us? Or
Good morning, Jim.
how are you?
I'm doing all right. This is almost the darkest hour in radio.
Well, I try.
Well, just from everything you hear and the history of DISD, I'm expecting one day to look down towards downtown Dallas from Garland over here and see like one of those mushroom clouds or something.
Yeah.
From implosion.
Although, and here's where I get really in trouble with Joyce Foreman and Bea Martinez, and I even get in trouble at home over this. The fact is, I think if you look at the young business leadership in the community, I never had any patience for the old types of kind of old Park City's white guys who used to stick their noses into this. But I think if you look at a lot of the leadership that has coalesced around Miles, they're very interesting people, and they seem very committed to doing something with the public schools.
Well, it's back in the day, all them schools were principaled by white guys, right?
The coaches, yeah.
Okay, and then some of the parents got tired of how their kids were being treated.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't even know either one of the principals or who was fired or anything.
Right.
Whether they were mistreating anybody or weren't, but sometimes human nature takes over our best intention.
I wonder what would happen. That's an interesting point. If they took all this, for a year they've been monitoring the principals and testing them out and going in and observing them and measuring them and all this stuff. I wonder what the results would have been if they'd done this same program with all the old white coaches who used to be principals. How do you think?
It probably would have changed a lot faster. But you know what? Those things happen with what? The next wave of what America survives on, and that's the next wave of immigrants.
Yeah.
Each wave of immigrants changes our local school system. But see, Dallas has worse problem than that, the immigrant change. It's that the parents don't care. There was people getting fired down there.
Yeah.
Luckily, we have a few people that care on whichever side they're on, for or against what's being done, that come and speak up. But I guarantee you, Jim, not even 3%. And that's 160,000 kids. Not even 3% of their parents showed up. When
we come back after this break, Randy, I thank you for calling. I want to talk about that thing you've brought up of parents not caring, and specifically with regard to immigrants, because some of this is cultural. It doesn't mean the parents don't give a damn. Jim Schutze, Get Off My Lawn. We'll be back in a minute for our final segment.
Project 143 gives orphans the opportunity to leave their orphanage for the summer and visit an American host family. Photos and bios are now available online. For more information or to be an orphan's family this summer, Project 143 at 720-263-7143 or project143.com. Because 143 million orphans worldwide need help. Consider hosting an orphan this summer with Project 143.
Hey, babes, take one.
Jim Schutze, with Get Off My Lawn. We've been talking about our favorite topic, DISD, school reform. Randy, a caller, just brought up the issue of parental involvement, and specifically, I think he mentioned it in the context with the presence of a huge number of immigrants in our system, and this is the stuff that never gets talked about. It's the the collision of our system and our culture with immigrant culture, which is huge in Dallas. We are an immigrant city. We're absolutely the biggest single contingent of folks out there in the city. The biggest single contingent. Well, I guess that's not true. I guess just depends on how you divide it up. But immigrants are a huge presence in our city, and immigrant culture is. And it's when we say immigrant culture, what are we talking about? We're talking mainly about people from Mexico. When we talk about people from Mexico, what are we talking about? We're talking mainly about people from central states like Guanajuato, who've made this a center of their immigration from Mexico to the United States. Why is that significant? Well, you're not talking about border people, and you're not talking about major urban center people in Mexico. You're talking about people who come from deep in Mexican culture, relatively farther away from American contact than a lot of other people in Mexico. So coming here is a big leap. Let's examine the question of parental involvement. I know from being a DISD parent, everybody who's been around DISD knows it seems to be hard to get Mexican immigrant parents to show up for school stuff. Now, it depends a lot. What I saw at Woodrow Wilson High School was that you could push certain buttons. You had to make people feel welcome. It made a big difference when you have your meeting. If you're dealing with working people, got to work all day, so you can't have your meeting while they got to be at their jobs. Food makes a big difference. Invite people to bring food. Show with the food that people from Mexico are welcome. Immigrants are shy in some ways, or sometimes they don't get what's going on. Their experience in Mexico has not taught them to have big warm fuzzies about government and official events. But these are people who left everything they knew and came here to provide a better life for their families. So it's kind of hard to say that these are people who don't care about their families. These are very, very determined people who care. All of the evidence is that they care hugely about their families, but you gotta know how to reach them. I did a story for the Observer years ago about a girl from Adamson who was a daughter of Mexican immigrants, and she was accepted into UT because she was in the top 10% of her class, and she didn't know anything about how to go to college, how to do it. She only decided at the last minute to take UT up on it, and she drove down there kind of 2 days into registration. She didn't know where UT was. She wound up in San Antonio, and somebody had to steer her back to UT. There were no dorm rooms available, so they put her in the basement of a class building on a cot by herself. She flunked everything because she was so ill-prepared. But she sat in that basement and experimented with different ways to make herself learn. And she finally found a way, and I forget exactly what her trick was. It was something about writing things out. I think she found a blackboard, and she wrote stuff out on the blackboard. So she taught herself how to learn, and she became a 4.0 student. And last time I talked to her, she's had a great job. She graduated with a business degree, and she's working for a bank. But she told me that when she got in the car to drive off to go to UT, her father slapped her and called her a whore. And when she told me this story, she said, now you're an Anglo, and so you're going to interpret that as meaning that my father is an ignorant Mexican peasant. She said, I have a different interpretation. She said, in my culture, loyalty to family is extremely important, and loyalty and putting family ahead of your own ego is extremely important. And so she said, I understand why my father interpreted my driving off to seek my own good and my own advancement looked to him like just a betrayal of everything he believed in, almost at a religious level. She said, my father is a good man and a hero would die for his family. By the way, also last time I talked to her, she had this big job with the bank, but she wasn't living in a condo in Uptown. She had gone back to Oak Cliff to live with her family and to help her family. So she had remained loyal to those values. I'm just telling this story to illustrate that I think we have huge cultural leaps here, both in the attempt by the immigrants to comprehend us and our system and our culture and to click into it, and frankly on our part to understand them, and to stop. And one thing we could try is stop interpreting it, stop thinking of each other as bad people, and try to figure out what's good about each other and what we're trying to do that's right. But all of this colors the school debate. All of this collision, it winds up sounding like it's Hispanics versus black people. That's because the white people have checked out of it to a large extent. I've heard just as many white people who had their kids in DISD elementary schools complaining bitterly about announcements in Spanish on the PA system. Why does my kid have to listen to that on the PA system? Well, I don't know. Does it really hurt your kid to hear another language? And one reason the announcements are in Spanish on the PA system in a majority Mexican immigrant school is so the kids will know what's being announced. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're at 972-647-1893, 972-647-1893, and we got Joe waiting patiently on the line. Joe, what's up today?
Hey, it's glad to be calling your show, but it's real interesting. We're talking about education, but DSD, but it seems like we're not very educated as a people talking nationwide. Mm-hmm. A psychologist would address what you're talking about like this. They would say that we spend too much time trying to change people, change a culture, rather than trying to understand people, understand the culture. Mm-hmm. Once you understand people, you can get much more mileage done. You get further down the road. Mm-hmm. But if we just start on change, it's harder. It'll come much harder. Mm-hmm. I can recall there was a guy who was making an example once about this part of Africa. They was donating seeds. They was trying to get them to do more farming. Mm-hmm. And nothing was taking place. It was extreme poverty and hunger. Mm-hmm. And when they would go back and check on the people, they would find out that they hadn't planted anything, and they inquired why. Mm-hmm. They were boiling the corn and cooking and eating it. It was creating harmony.
Oh, sure.
And so it's you have to, as I said, if you understand, I can recall as a child in Mississippi, mm-hmm. when I would hear people make comments that black people, they stored a lot of old junk cars around the house and how junky they were. They were unaware that these people were getting parts off that car to fix their car. If you would notice, a lot of times, that car was similar to the car that they were driving, maybe stuff with General Motors stuff. So ignorance is really bliss. You have to know what you're looking at. Yeah. This guy is not so junky and trashy that he doesn't want a good lawn or yard. He doesn't have an account at AutoZone or Napa. And so you have to know what you're looking at. But getting back more on point here about getting the people out to the PTA meetings and so forth, thing like that. When I got in here from New York, I noticed when they call a school board meeting out in Lancaster that there a lot of other stuff would come before the meeting. Right. And I was disgusted at that because I wasn't used to that. They would put your child in a plate. You would sit up there and watch a play, and then at the end of the play, you would get a school board meeting. What they were doing, they knew if they put your child in activities, the parent would come out.
Right. Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I get you, and that's not a bad thought. They do that at DISD board meetings too, and I get kind of bored with it. But I'm an old grumpy guy. It's probably makes sense, but you have to sell it a little if you really want to bring people in. Because I've attended a ton of public meetings in my life, Joe, where the message was, "We don't want you here. This isn't if you go to city council briefings, they have, if you're the public, you sit in Dallas City Hall right now, you sit off in a little peanut gallery. On the other side, they have all the city staff and the elected officials. They have a big buffet. And they have stuff to eat and drinks and everything, and they're schmoozing around, having a kind of a party. And if you're the public, you're squeezed over at one end, and you can't have any donuts. You can't have any coffee because you're just the public. And the message is, why don't you just go home? You don't belong here. So if you want people to come in, you have to turn that around some way. Would you agree? Oh, I think I lost Joe. I'm sorry. I guess Joe, I don't blame you. And we've had some great callers today. We have just a few minutes left. We're at 972-647-1893. 972-647-1893. This whole thing of us against you, it's just human nature. Look, I remember when the Hispanic presence started out in Dallas, making itself felt. I happened to be on the board of Head Start of Greater Dallas at the time, and there was a lot of feeling that Hispanics were being underserved. And so Hispanic activists were beginning to show up at the board meetings and call board members and stuff to complain about it. But this line that you got from the Hispanic activists was all entirely that black people had created discrimination in America. And I tried to say in a couple meetings, you guys need to catch up on the history a little more here. Black people are not the reason why you're getting shoved into certain neighborhoods and schools and you're being underserved. I'm afraid it goes back a little bit more to my own kind here. But the initial approach of Hispanic activists was very anti-black. And it's because, I guess, in the neighborhoods, that's who was in front of them. That's who they saw. Nobody gets out of this with a free pass. We've all brought this animus to the fight in this country. We all have a tendency to want to join up behind a banner in our own little group and make it the other group's fault. What's going on with the school system right now, I feel very strongly, is that a very interesting, if not a coalition, a coalescence of people from a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds are saying, we can fight those fights forever. But if you can teach these children to read and write well by the end of the third grade, their lives are changed, our life as a nation is changed, our destiny is changed. So go ahead and debate black versus brown, brown versus black, black versus white, all you want. But if you will just teach the children, all of the children, to read and write well by the end of third grade, then for the rest of their careers in school, they know what's going on, as opposed to the current model where you don't teach them. And so even the smartest kids are sitting there with no idea what's going on, feeling like they're in jail. They're there because they have to be, not because there's anything interesting going on. And I think that this coalescence I'm talking about is sort of looking for one big, simple door to walk through, to say we're not ever going to figure out all that other stuff. It just sort of doesn't, you can't map it out. We're never going to solve all of the other issues of psychology and bias by arguing about it. But if you can just teach the kids to read and write, all of them, by the end of third grade, and then keep them in school by keeping them interested, then you have a whole different deal. And how do we know that that works? Well, for one thing, if you look at private schools, which are really interesting these days, a lot of private schools have endowments, they have money to spend, and they use those endowments on scholarships, and they use the scholarships a lot to create racial and ethnic diversity. Several years ago, I spoke to a bunch of kids at Hockaday, which is a very exclusive, tough to get into private school in Dallas, but they were very mixed. The majority of them were white kids and probably rich white kids, but there were a bunch of African-American kids from southern Dallas, and there were Hispanic kids, and man, that place was just crackling with electricity. These kids were all peers. I'm not saying that the ethnic differences between them were erased at all, but they were all able to hold their own in debate with each other, and it was really great to see. I think you see it in a lot of the suburban districts. The kids there are very stratified socioeconomically, but in terms of race and ethnicity, a lot of the suburbs are often way more diverse in this classroom than we are in the city, and it's really interesting to see what happens as long as all of those kids are academically competent. That's the only way it works. Everybody's got to be able to read and write and do math and keep up with what's going on in the classroom, and then those differences between them become very interesting. They become fuel for a lot of cross-fertilization and exciting moments. But you have to teach all the kids to read and write by the end of third grade, or it doesn't happen. And that's what a lot of this school debate is about. Some of the other differences that we talked about at the beginning of the show, you know, the difference in DISD in terms of who holds what jobs and who's got the big money jobs, and the fact that the top jobs tend to be held by white people. That's not just a reflection of straight up malevolence or discrimination. It's a reflection of history. And who got the advantages of education 20 years ago? Those tended to be white people, and so they have been qualified for those top jobs by virtue of the way things were 20 years ago. So what we want to do is change the way things are now, so that 20 years from now, the top jobs, not just in the school system, but in the whole country, will reflect what kind of people live here. Back in the 60s, they formed this thing called Block Partnership, where they thought it was a great idea to bring white people and black people together to talk about what they wanted. And you always had white people staring across the room at black people saying, "What do you want?" And the answer was always, "What you got? What do you think we want?" So why that's a tough lesson, I don't know, but it seems to be taking us a long time to figure it out. Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. We'll see you here next week. Thank you.
KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas and Fort Worth, the voice of the people.
Business owners, tell KNON's listeners about your business. You can put your business or event on KNON. KNON currently has space available to run announcements for you. Tell KNON's listeners about your goods, services, nightclub, concert, or event. Help keep the voice of the people on the air while putting your information on the air. KNON's been named the #1 radio station in Dallas by both the Dallas Observer and D Magazine. Put your business with Dallas's #1 station. Call now for more information at 214-828-9500, extension 227. Or extension 233. For more information, go to KNON.org and click on the Run Spots on KNON page. It's a great way for your business to support community radio while letting more people know about you.